nervous, Saagar? I don't see your gun. I'm Stephanie Hamill. This is Saagar Enjeti and Vince Coglianese, and we are here to talk about your very special sit-down interview with the President of the United States. A lot of people don't realize how difficult it is to actually get this sit-down exclusive interview. A lot of people in the mainstream media have been trying to get these interviews. He's very selective. So if you could go over the process of what it was like to even just get this interview.
Well, we came up with the money to build the wall, and that was why he was like, you know what, I want to do an interview with you guys, only if you got the money. So we did, and now that's the news we're breaking this morning.
It cost us $22 billion.
The wall is being built. Saagar and I found the money. We can't explain how. No, it was good. Saagar, I know you can explain the process better than I can.
We've basically been negotiating with the White House for a long time.
Just like every other news outlet that's been trying
to. Right, every other news outlet has been trying to do this. We've been talking with Sarah Sanders. We had an angle. We want to talk to the president about the midterms. It kind of surreptitiously lined up, and we lined us up for Tuesday and they said September 4th at 2:30. And I couldn't believe it. We finally got a time after weeks of negotiation.
And it was a good day to do it for a bunch of reasons, but among them are Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings began yesterday. So we were excited to be able to speak to the president on the same day as his second Supreme Court nominee had a chance to face down Democrats. And boy, the drama from that hearing, which started instantly yesterday, as of course the audience knows and as you know, was on our minds as we were preparing for this interview. Great, there's a lot to actually get into with him, including this confirmation.
Yeah, so yesterday, I mean, I keep an eye on our website all day long, and I also get the alerts. People can sign up for our app, and you get the alerts to your phone. So I was just blown away by the amount of stories that you were able to produce. I was asking Saagar this morning when I came in, I was like, do you have arthritis today? Because pretty much every article on our website came from both of you.
Yeah.
And I mean, you guys must have been just flames off the keyboard. And I mean, how do you even prepare for this interview with the president?
Well, first, Saagar, tell the people at home about how you sustained a hand injury.
Yes, I was typing basically for 8 hours straight last night, and around 11 p.m. when I was filing my last story that came out of this piece, I started getting a hand cramp here in my elbow, and I was like, I was writing with one hand. So that's the sacrifice I made for you.
Wait, but I like the story about how you were like eating Chipotle with one hand. And then your dog, I'm going to call PETA and the Humane Society on you. Dog was like begging to go outside. I mean, people don't realize what we're doing behind the scenes. They think it's just so glamorous and think they're just like magically written and just interviews are just done. And it's not like that. I mean, we're real humans, right?
Yes, I was shoveling Chipotle in one hand, writing a piece with the other, and my dog was like, please take me out. And I was like, you have to wait until I file the story.
Did your dog ever get to go outside?
She did. She did. She did get to use the bathroom. So
okay.
We're all good. We're fine.
I mean, there's a variety of topics, and I was really impressed because these are a lot of stories that are in the news cycle. This is very timely. A lot of questions were answered that I had. So how did you prepare for this? I mean, did you just base it off the news cycle? Do you look at the president's Twitter feed? That's kind of how I prepare for some interviews. I'll look at the Twitter feed and see what they're talking about. Also kind of see what other people are talking about, the headlines and everything, and then tying it all in.
A typical Washington interview will focus and delve deep into the details of like Mueller probe or Congress, legislation and policy. But the President of the United States is the leader of our country, so we wanted to get him on the record on a slate of issues that were facing us. Everything from the Mueller probe, the Woodward book, but also to the sex abuse scandal in the Catholic Church. What was going on with the Neil Armstrong movie, the Colin Kaepernick and Nike issue. These are things that actual people care about, and we wanted to make sure that he could speak to the people on these issues because he really doesn't get a platform ever to talk about it.
And besides Twitter, but he chooses to. But but he hadn't talked about almost any of the issues that we chatted with him about yesterday on Twitter yet. And it was neat to tread on new territory with him on a whole host of issues. The way to prepare, I think, for an interview like this, one of the ways we did was certainly to think of, okay, what are all the areas where we think that he has something interesting to say? Mm-hmm. Things that we haven't heard before. Because the president, because of how frequently he speaks in public and how frequently he tweets, he has a tendency to repeat himself a lot on certain issues. Mueller's a perfect example.
And he does it almost verbatim every time. So I knew that if we asked him X question, we were like, I know exactly what answer we're going to get.
So he'll say Mueller's a witch hunt. He'll say the Mueller investigation is a witch hunt. So how do you get something new and different out of that?
Yeah.
And
so did he say that? I have the transcript here. I haven't looked through the whole thing.
Well,
So
with the
did he get to that talking point that it's a witch hunt? And I'm not saying that it's not.
Yeah, but
I mean, I totally agree
all
with him,
credit
actually.
to Vince in that he's great at crafting questions to get new answers. So what we asked him was, we said, sir, what did you think of Bob Mueller when you interviewed him for the job of FBI director? And he said, I liked him. Did anybody see that coming? He gave his personal impression of Bob Mueller, and then he started talking about he was conflicted and a little bit of the background.
Was that in one of your stories?
That was in one of our stories. I mean, he called him conflicted, and he said it was an illegal investigation, which he said in the past. But the color of I liked Bob Mueller when I interviewed him, I mean, who could have seen that coming?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't expect that. And so I think this, for both of you, this was your first time sitting down with a sitting president. I don't know. I don't know if you'd ever reached out to the Obama administration during that time to try to get an interview, and it obviously didn't happen.
Right. Well, we tried to interview the Obama administration on any number of issues, and very rarely were we called on, unless it was by accident, which was great. Thank you for doing that, Obama administration.
So what was it like for you guys? I know I have not had the honor of interviewing the president yet. Hopefully, POTUS will give me a chance one day. But
let me reset to sort of the beginning of our day. We got together yesterday morning, had an early lunch, late breakfast, sort of, and then from there went about a planning meeting. Everything from last minute tuning to what questions we thought were important, because we were really we took our time with figuring out which questions were important, highlighting them, prioritizing them, because
which order based on the amount of time
you just never know how much time you're actually going to get. You guys could have been cut off within the first 6 minutes, 5 minutes.
We were told 15 minutes.
Yeah,
we walked in.
That's right.
Yeah,
and I'll get to that point too.
Yeah.
But my only point is, this is, again, for anybody out there who's interested in doing journalism and sitting down and doing an interview where you're speaking to somebody who has limited time, who has people who are handling them, or for whatever reason you have an expectation that you're not going to have a lot of time to, you need to triage your questions. You need to have a sense of what's a priority for me, what can I hit, and how many questions can I get out. We also have to know, how long do they typically answer?
Yeah.
So the President of the United States, President Trump, has a tendency to answer a really long time when he's asked. You could just throw out a noun, Colin Kaepernick, and he'll go on for 5 minutes potentially.
Yeah, it's a lot of stream of consciousness.
Well, I think it's also like a delicate balance and a fine dance, because you want people to feel comfortable and know where you're coming from. And sometimes you have some really important questions, but you want to make them feel comfortable and talk about a few other things before you jump into it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's my mistake, but
Vince had a great.
But like you said, with the timing thing,
Vince had a great way of doing this. Was we opened up with the interview, and we knew that the president was very agitated about the Bob Woodward book. But what
we suspected
he was, and Vince immediately just said, "Sir, we have a lot of questions for you today. We have 1,000 questions that we want to get to. Let's just get this out of the way." And we did. That was the first thing that we made news on, and we immediately moved on from there. So we were able to cover our bases and kind of weave in and out of subjects that we know he would be a little touchy on, and then things that he was very comfortable speaking about.
And the goal to all of this is, one, you want to get the leader of the free world on the record as much as possible.
Yes.
We want to get him to cover as many topics as possible.
With
that was
new on-the-record information.
That's right. And also, you'd like for him to go as long as possible with us. Now, as Saagar was saying just a moment ago, we arrive at the White House, and sort of the rigmarole of like waiting in the press briefing room, wherein I admit I lied to a reporter. I lied. I lied. I don't know what kind of journalist that makes me, but the Daily Mail's White House correspondent, Francesca Chambers, sweet girl, I see her down the hallway, and I know for a fact that if she spots me, she's going to ask me what I'm doing there. Because Saagar, yes, he would be at the White House often. Vince Coglianese, less likely to be at the White House for any particular reason, unless there was an actual meeting or appointment of some kind. So I see her, I walk down the hallway, I see her back, and I'm like, okay, I cannot let her see me. So I go down the hallway.
Yes.
I do. And then I go to the restroom, because I had to go to the restroom before the interview.
Yeah.
And then I'm coming back out, walking back into the Brady press briefing room, and I turn the corner, and I'm like, I've made it. Like, she hasn't seen me. And just like in Metal Gear Solid, when you're walking with Snake down the hallway, and one of the guards sees you, and it goes, like, I hear from right behind me, I hear Fran go, Vince!
Oh no.
And I'm like, what do I do? So now going through my head in all of this is, I can't tell her I'm about to do an interview because I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, and also I don't want to jeopardize. You can't get on Twitter. I don't want to jeopardize.
Okay, I was going to ask you why it was a big deal, and it's because
if people start tweeting, "Oh my gosh, Trump is sitting down with the Daily Caller," then they might freak out and they might cut it short. I mean, this is something you want to generally keep under wraps until it's over.
Also, there's a bit of superstition involved.
That's also true.
I don't want to throw any wrench into this. Who cares? I mean, if the world knows. I just think that the point is let them know once we have it in the can. So now. She's like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm just here on Daily Caller Business," I said.
On Daily Caller Business? Yes. That just doesn't even sound natural.
And I thought that was good enough, but like a good reporter.
Question marks out. What do you mean, like Daily Caller Business?
Like a good reporter, she says to me, she goes, "Do you have an interview?" And I look at her straight in the face and I go, "No." And then I turn, and she's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, well, we're always working for interviews, that kind of thing." And then we exchanged niceties, and by this point, Saagar's like, "Dude, we have to go. What are you doing?"
Yeah, I was like, "Let's go."
So I follow Saagar up the hallway, and we're walking towards the West Wing at this point, because now we're like, en route. And I'm like, "Saagar, I just told Fran Chambers that we do not have an interview. We have an interview."
Yeah.
Like, I lied to the girl.
Yeah.
So this weighed heavily on me.
And that's so not like you. Because
he got upset.
I mean, you're a very honest person.
Just
for the record, you were an honest person.
Thank you. Just to give you a sense of my nerves, we're literally standing outside of Trump's Oval Office. Like, we can see.
There's a waiting area right there.
Yeah. We can see the president.
Have you been in the Oval Office before, or was this?
I visited it on tours.
Okay.
I mean, I've been, I've poked my head into the Oval Office, but I've never gone in for an interview as we did in this case. So we see Trump. And I'm turning to Saagar, and we're being escorted by Bill Shine, who works for the White House, formerly of Fox News. He had told us 15 minutes is this interview.
He said 15 minutes, guys, very stern.
And I'm turning to Saagar, I'm like, "Saagar, what do I do about the Fran Chambers thing? I just told her we're not doing this interview." And my nerves were so strung up about the fact my Catholic guilt was getting the best of me. And I was like, "How do I handle this?" And Saagar's like, "What are you, insane?" Like, first of all, he's probably thinking, you should be more nervous about
I was like, we should be worried about the interview.
That we have to do a good interview. And here I am, concerned about.
Well, I've never seen you nervous about anything, and I just always.
No, he was messed up over this. He was upset.
It bothered me. And what kind of journalist am I lying to Fran Chambers?
This is something that goes through every reporter's mind, and a lot of people would never kind of share this information publicly. But I mean, and there was a lot of pressure because Trump, when it comes to the media, there's a lot of distrust, and there is, I guess, if you will, a war with the media and Trump, and there's a lot of back and forth. And it's not just media in general. He's talking about fake news, when people are clearly maliciously lying about things that are going on just to try to hurt the president and his agenda, which I think is a fair criticism from the president. So I'm assuming he doesn't think you're fake news reporters, and hence he had given you the meeting. But I know that he does interact with people that he doesn't specifically like.
Yeah, he seemed very comfortable with us. I think, several times Bill Shine said, "Oh, last question, guys," and Trump said, "Oh, these guys are great. Let's give him a few more." I mean, he stayed for 38 minutes, almost 3 times longer than he was supposed to.
And we saw, we knew there's a predicate for this. Bloomberg did an interview last week.
On Thursday.
And the president liked the tenor of the conversation, so he asked Sarah Huckabee Sanders in that case, "Don't worry about it. Let them keep asking questions," because Sarah Sanders was trying to bring it to a conclusion. And we saw an opportunity there, and we're hopeful that we would get the same treatment, and we did, and it worked nicely. And our thanks definitely to the White House communications team for helping to set it up, and definitely the president for chatting with us, not 15 minutes, but 38 minutes.
38 minutes in the lifetime of a president of the United States. That is an eternity.
It's a big deal. Yeah. And I saw that there's a little bit of criticism out there. People had a question, why would the president give this sit-down interview to the Daily Caller? They feel like they're entitled to sit-down interviews, and they haven't received them yet. I think that the Washington Post had called us a conservative website that's viewed as friendly toward the administration. I think just basic, as a reporter, your job is not to tell the way that you feel and push an agenda. You're supposed to just report the facts. And I hate when people just call us a conservative website. They don't realize that we have straight news reporters, we have liberals, we have libertarians, we have conservatives, we have maybe conservatives that aren't huge fans of Trump. So, I mean, the job of a reporter is to just report accurately, which has been lost. And so when people say that this is a conservative website friendly toward the president, and they would never label like a Vox News or any other news organization friendly to Obama, the Obama administration, and so I think it's really unfair. And what's your reaction to it, especially you, Saagar, since you are a neutral?
Let me start as somebody who's worked here since 2010, who's hired a lot of people for this job. I can't remember once ever asking somebody a conservative litmus question in any capacity, or what kind of political party affiliation they have, or who their candidate was. There are people who work in our newsroom who I actually don't know their politics.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But that aside, it's a bit lazy typically to say things like that.
Yeah,
and all we ask is for people to read us, because they would join.
Which they did, which is what the Washington Post did. They wrote 2 stories based on our interview about the comments on protesters. They cited us in their piece on Bob Woodward. We were linked by the New York Times, referenced by all 3 cable news networks. This is a news-making interview.
The New York Times, then the New York Times handled it like adults, which is to say, the Daily Caller, there was a time when people didn't know what the Daily Caller was.
Yeah.
And I worked here during that time. And it's been really nice to see that our visibility has risen commensurate with our reporting chops, as our reporters continue to deliver news story after news story, breaking news after breaking news item each day. So that's nice. And what's happened is we've gotten to the point where the most well-known paper in the country, the New York Times, can refer to the Daily Caller without qualification. Yeah. No need to explain who we are. We're a part of the conversation. And as long as we are, we're going to continue to ferret out information that's of interest to the American voter. And in this case, we have 20 million unique readers. You want to ask, why would Donald Trump go and speak to the Daily Caller? Turns out there are 20 million people who have an answer to that question.
Yeah, and I think something great about the Daily Caller and why I enjoy working here is because I think we are fair, and we will give a platform, and we'll talk to any Democrat, we'll talk to anyone, and our reporters will give a fair shake and a fair story, but a lot of times we are shut out, and so that's maybe why we would get more interviews on one side than the other. But if Maxine Waters wants to come in here and sit down with me and talk about some of the issues, or with you guys, we would love that.
Well,
we would
consider this a standing invite.
This is an invitation.
Congresswoman Maxine Waters, come here. We'll interview you. We'll have a fair discussion. So, okay, let's get back to Trump. So. A lot of people, we see these politicians on TV, or we see the President of the United States on TV, but how are they in person? So what was Trump like? And describe his energy, his vibe, his demeanor.
Trump in this particular interview, I've seen him in many settings. I cover him now for a long time. And he was obviously upset about this Woodward book. I could tell he was a bit agitated, but he was happy to be in a forum where he could vent a little bit and talk with us. So he was not as affable as he sometimes can be in these types of settings, but he was a little bit agitated. Vince, I thought, had the best take on this. Him and I discussed it on his morning radio show, WMAL, Mornings on the Mall, which is, with Trump, you get this feeling of a completely isolated figure from all of institutional Washington. As in, he is just so out of step and on a different plane in terms of his thinking, in terms of his action, in terms of his experience, education, etc., from the rest of DC, that he is just completely removed and then planted in this Oval Office. So you have all of the trappings of official DC around him with a guy who is not of this place at all. And it's so interesting to see that. And he told us, he said, I feel amazingly alone.
Yeah, I've got the quote here. There was a point where the president was sort of riffing on, he regularly asks people around him in his administration, like, why are we spending money to protect immensely wealthy countries? Here, this is what he says. We're protecting immensely wealthy countries, and they're not paying us for the protections. I say, why are we protecting you when you're very wealthy and you wouldn't be here for 2 weeks if it wasn't for us? Why aren't we being reimbursed for this massive cost, fully reimbursed for this massive cost that we're taking care of? And that's when I asked, well, do you feel alone in that view? Do you feel that you have support inside the administration? And he looked at me and he said, and he did it with like gravity, he said, amazingly alone. Amazingly. A lot of generals don't understand it, a lot of people don't understand it, amazingly alone. But I've gotten many converts over the last period of a year, but I started off amazingly alone. And he went on and on about that. But that, to me, I thought was symbolic, to your point, Saagar, of like the bigger issue that the president faces, which is that he's in a city that, first of all, doesn't respect him. They don't like him.
Yeah,
they don't agree with him.
They don't want him.
They don't. They're strongly averse to somebody who would even question their worldview. Not just say that their worldview is wrong. Begin to even question it, because no matter what party you're with in Washington, Republicans or Democrats, the city sort of has a momentum.
Yeah.
Both parties kind of agree on most of the major issues. NATO spending, how much we spend on other countries for their defense.
Iraq. South Korea.
For somebody to come along and just throw up a question mark and say, hey, should we reconsider that? That is
huge threat to
heresy. I mean, so in some ways, when he challenges conventional wisdom, whether he's right or wrong, when he challenges conventional wisdom, he sort of upsets everything. And I think I left yesterday with a stronger impression of, it's I don't know, I don't want to call it an act of bravery, but it's an act of audacity that he continues to maintain that in the face of everyone around him, including the people he works with, saying, you know what, the old ways are the good ways.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that he'd be amazingly alone, and he's not just going with the status quo. And again, his effort is to drain the swamp, and that's for both sides. It's not just a liberal thing, it's a conservative establishment thing. And so I could imagine that, and I mean, that is an amazing quote. We're going to probably wrap up this part. I just want to get some final thoughts. Everyone can catch your stories on the website. I mean, it's all Saagar and Vince. I mean, the whole way down, next page over.
We just posted the full transcript.
Yeah, so give it a read, 8 pages.
If you love reading, then this is your chance.
So, Saagar, final thoughts before we go to questions.
Yeah, I think overall, the president, I'm just so struck, like you said, Vince, that 2 years in, restricted by this huge establishment. I mean, think about how many generals, how many foreign policy advisors, how many people of huge repute are coming into his office telling him he's wrong every single day. And he said, no, 65 million people voted for me for a reason, and it's because of thoughts like this. It is such a striking thing. The job of being president is already so isolating, and President Trump is probably our most isolated president in multiple generations.
Well, I think so too, especially with digital recording and all these leaks and stuff. I mean, they really can't even have a conversation.
Mm-hmm. Well, imagine, if you will, just to stretch on that point for just a second, imagine, if you will, like whatever, no matter if the Woodward quotes are true or the allegations in the book are true, we do know 2 things that are true. Omarosa recorded conversations with the president and has now used them against him. And conversations with
And this was way before she was even fired. She was already planning.
And she was doing it in the White House, too.
Yeah.
And
outrageous.
And his personal attorney, Michael Cohen, did the same thing with him without his knowledge. And what's the one virtue that President Trump is best known for?
Trust. I mean, he has to have trust in the people that he's working with.
Loyalty.
Loyalty.
Yeah. That's my point. But yeah, you're right. That's the same. That's one and the same. Trust in the people he's working with. It's loyalty. And they violated it. And imagine how cagey he feels about that.
Yeah, I mean,
now he's putting on a strong face about this Woodward book. He's saying, "Look, it's all false." But there must be some part of him that says, "Okay, some of it must be true. Maybe it's true." And why wouldn't he think that, given the way that some of the people who claim to be loyal lieutenants to him, claim to be personal to him, have violated his trust over and over and over? So it adds to sort of Saagar's point about being alone. And one last thing I'll say about the Oval Office interview, and not to get too poetic, but one of the great things about this country is the fact that Saagar and I can go and sit across the Resolute desk from the leader of the free world and ask him literally anything we want.
Anything. No questions screened, nothing.
And get him to answer them. And to put that down on paper, put it online, and have it for our 20 million readers. And by the way, so many more who've already seen the many things that we've gotten out of this. To see that and consume it, and to know a little bit more about what he's thinking and about what he intends for the country. That's a blessing. And I'm really glad that we got to do it.
Yeah.
It's great.
Should we take some questions?
Yes, we will take some questions, although I don't think we can answer some of these.
Try.
Michael wants to know when the wall is being built, since you guys were joking that you had $22 billion.
When is the wall being built? The president, Michael, would tell you that the wall is already being built. He pointed to, in our transcript, you can see he pointed to $3.2 billion that have been appropriated to it, but he is waiting until the next cycle in government spending where he could force a government shutdown, which is another thing that he told us here, over the full $25 billion in wall spending.
But
he said he would like to get it done in the next year. He said he can do it all in 1 year once he gets the money.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to be, the impression I was left with was something that changed about the government shutdown conversation. The impression I was left with yesterday is that he seems way less likely to use a government shutdown right now.
He said, I don't like shutdowns.
Yeah. But maybe after the midterms. Right. There's kind of a window of opportunity.
Well, and there's saying that the government doesn't actually really shut down.
True. Good point.
Yeah.
Next question. Don't know if you can answer this, but I'll just bring it up. This is from Lisa. She wants to know when Clinton and Obama will be arrested. Lock them up. Does anyone know?
Well, charges have to be filed.
Yeah.
Charges
have
to be indicted.
Thanks, Lisa.
I think Jeff Sessions has a lot more on his mind right now. And it includes where he's going to work next.
And somebody else wanted to know why Hillary's not in jail, but you already answered that. Another one is, did President Trump apologize to Meghan McCain for criticizing her after her losing her
father.
That's
the question about, let me just say, the question about the McCain funeral and whether or not he consumed it and what he thought of it, that was one that was on our minds that we couldn't, we couldn't get to it in the 38 minutes that we had.
There was just so much that we wanted to cover. I wish we knew.
And 38 minutes isn't a long time. I mean, it is with the sitting president, but just in general, that's just, I mean, we'll probably be here for 30 minutes.
Right.
Yeah, so it goes by so fast, and there's just not enough time to cover everything.
It's a great question, though, and I really do wish we had an answer to it.
It's a fair question. Let's see. And this is from Jenny. She says, is Trump crazy, or is it just that everyone around him is crazy?
I don't think he's crazy at all. He's a highly rational figure. He consumes a lot of information. I think one of the things, if you come through and you read our transcript, you can see how much detail he absorbs about the things that are going on around him. He's developed a real cognizance by being on the world stage about what he can and can't say about different countries. And so a lot of the criticism of him being this like obtuse kind of brusque figure, it can be true in a sense, but in reality, he is very much learning on the job. He's got quite a bit of intelligence for how things are going to play in the media, and he doesn't get enough credit for that.
I think, well, he clearly has an ego.
Yeah.
He clearly likes to counterpunch a lot, meaning like if almost anybody attacks him. At one point, I felt like anybody on Twitter could attack him and he would respond. Yeah. But that's changed a bit. I think he's raised his threshold just a touch.
But he doesn't do that until somebody attacks first.
Right, that's my point.
But he's developed the gravity. He developed the sense of the gravity of the office for who should I punch to.
But you know something I noticed in recent weeks that I think is really interesting, and Saagar and I have chatted about this a couple of times, that I don't think a lot of people have noticed. There's been a shift in his tone about a couple of things, and he's been more inclusive of his so-called political enemies. The examples are this. Social media companies. He's been talking in recent weeks, and he reiterated the point with us yesterday. He doesn't want to see CNN censored on Facebook. He doesn't want Facebook or any of these social media companies to impose censorship on places that he dislikes, because he's internalized the principle of it, which is, you know, if you do it to me, why wouldn't they do it to you? And vice versa. If they do it to that guy, why wouldn't they do it to you?
Yeah. So it's really interesting.
There was that, and then the other thing that stuck out yesterday, and again, it was a little more even-handed than we normally get from the president, which was on Nike and Colin Kaepernick. We were questions of, what about this Nike endorsement deal of Colin Kaepernick? What do you think of it? And the president came out and said that he disagreed with Nike, he thought it was a, quote, terrible message that Nike was sending, but then he simultaneously said that as a business in America, it's their right to make that decision, including to make decisions the rest of us disagree with.
He said that's what this country is all about.
I was
floored,
somewhat. And we were floored because it was distinctly un-Trumpy.
Yes.
Because the Trump that we see in the media, by and large, and the Trump we see on Twitter, is constantly sort of throwing the next jab.
Yeah.
But there is a version of the president.
His reaction to Nike, I think, was a little unexpected, especially because we know how passionate he is about the NFL anthem kneelers and how he feels about that. And then for Nike to promote somebody and say that that's such a big sacrifice. And again, I think this hit a lot of our readers, you know, the wrong way. They don't love Colin Kaepernick.
Right.
I mean, based on what I've seen on social media.
No, there's no love.
I just did a monologue on yesterday. I don't love Colin Kaepernick. I think he's a disgrace. I think he's whiny, and I think that he's ungrateful. And
it's hard to love somebody who you think is a disgrace and whiny, ungrateful.
Yeah, and I mean, how many opportunities he's been given in this country, and as a minority, I mean, pretty much, you know, we can do whatever we want if you put the effort in, and nobody's stopping me, nobody's stopping Saagar. You're a White House correspondent. You just had an interview with the President of the United States, and has anyone stopped you?
No, nobody has.
I like how you just assumed my race, too. That was great.
Okay, we'll take maybe one more question.
Okay.
Do you guys think that Kavanaugh will get approved? I think the votes are there. Yes.
He is going to get approved.
So I don't understand what's all the political theater then. I mean, I predicted this.
It's a confirmation hearing.
I know, but is it really necessary?
Well, it's unprecedented in terms of the way confirmation hearings have been conducted for Supreme Court justices. The Democrats are definitely putting on a show. How do I know this? And it's not just about delaying the hearing. If they wanted to stop the hearing and delay it entirely, they could have. In fact, there's a rule called the 2-hour rule. Yesterday, they could have invoked it and stopped the hearing entirely. They didn't. And the reason for that is because they like the political spectacle. They feel aggrieved about Merrick Garland. They're upset about Merrick Garland not becoming a Supreme Court justice under President Obama. And simultaneously, there are Democrats within the party who see this as an opportunity to gin up support in the base and to vote for them in the midterms, because look how hard those Democrats are fighting for me. That's essentially the message. Here, what we know, though, is Brett Kavanaugh will be confirmed. And yesterday's announcement by Doug Ducey, the governor of Arizona, that John Kyle will be the next senator from Arizona, at least temporarily, to fill in John McCain's seat, is all the more reason why Kavanaugh will be confirmed. Not just because Kyle's a reliable Republican vote, but because John Kyle was the guy who took Kavanaugh to meet every other senator in this process. He's what they call his Sherpa. And he was a Sherpa in the process, which means he's voting for Kavanaugh. Right?
Yeah, I just say that the optics of the hearing and just kind of the resistance that's happening there, I don't think that helps Democrats whatsoever for the midterm elections. We saw unhinged liberals on social media saying that a woman holding her arm was a white power sign, and she's Jewish and half Hispanic, and her grandparents were survivors of the Holocaust. So it just that's Trump derangement syndrome in full display.
That's crazy.
That's how undercover white supremacists are these days.
They
can be half Hispanic, Jewish descendants of Holocaust survivors, and they're actually white supremacists by the way they grab their forearms.
But for somebody to even consider somebody holding their arm as racist, that's like to me liberals in 28. It's deranged. Yeah. I mean, so in a sense, every time you hear people speak, you always have to question it. If they're just out there, even just putting that, I'm embarrassed for them.
I like that. That's the takeaway. Every time you hear people speak, you have to question it.
You have to question it.
Question everything.
Yes. Everything. Anyways.
Whose slogan is that?
Well,
it's
Saagar, did I give you a final thought?
You're an insane
person. Did
I
give you a final thought?
Yeah, you did.
Okay,
Saagar colluding with Russia over here.
We're going to have to wrap it up here. Thank you for watching, and we'll definitely have more updates soon.
Great.
And you can check out their articles on the Daily Caller webpage.
Yes, thank you.
Read them, all of them. Thanks.